Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa Belisle, and you are listening to or watching Radio Maine. Today, I have with me artist Laurie Fisher. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
I love the fact that you brought this beautiful piece behind us with the swaths of blue because it reminds me of how you and I first connected.
Oh, true.
Even though we didn't really know each other at that point. You know, obviously there's probably something else going on with this particular piece, but you could say it looks a little like a swimming pool.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, before I painted this piece, I did a painting that was really reminiscent of water. It was accidental. And then that translated into how I resolved this one. So you're right. Wasn't intentional water, but...
Well, tell me about this piece, and then we'll go back to our swimming pool connection, because now that we've got people intrigued.
Oh.
But let's talk about your art first, since that's why you're here.
Yeah, explaining the art is something that I don't know that I can do eloquently. For me, I'm a process painter. Working with the materials is really the joy and, you know, the discovery and just the act of creation itself. And so where they end up, they end up. So I don't come to a canvas with any preconceived ideas at all. So I definitely didn't have a swimming pool or water in mind or a color palette. This one, you can see, if you look closely enough, a lot of layers behind it, different colors and different ideas, and that's just how they evolve.
So because I am not an artist, when you say process painter, I think I have a sense of what that means. But for you, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a process painter?
Well, and I didn't mean to say that as if it's some title that I assigned to myself. But as I've learned about myself as a painter over the years, I've realized that it's the interaction with the materials themselves that inspire me. So sometimes when I need a boost or just need a little dose of inspiration, I'll just go wander around at the art store, and a color might jump out at me, or a new material, a new oil stick or something, and it'll just transform all the work in the studio at that time. And so, you know, color is definitely one of my subjects, but it's also because of the material itself, and the color is part of that material. And so I really just, I get really lost in just the contact with the materials, you know, with my body.
So when you use words like visceral, I mean, you're really talking about this kind of physical, emotional interaction with the things that you're using to create your art.
Yeah, I think there's a creative intelligence in our bodies. And again, I only came to know that because, you know, I spend a lot of time looking at a piece that I'm stuck on. They all get stuck. And that's why they can take months sometimes. And they all get to a place where I'm just not sure. And sometimes I'll turn it against the wall and won't look at it for a while. Or, you know, I have my methods of getting back into it. But sometimes as I'm stuck trying to solve something in my mind, even then I know that I just have to act. I don't always do that well. I sometimes spend too much time still thinking I can resolve it in my head or come up with an idea or come up with the next step in my head. But if I actually just pick up the paint, even if it's on something else, you know, a small study or something, if I actually just get going with the materials, usually it unlocks an answer or an idea or a next move. Sometimes I'm working on one painting and I think I'm making a mark on a painting over here, and it turns out that mark actually belongs on another piece and it resolves it, you know. But so it's this kind of push-pull between all the work all the time. But it's really when I'm actually in process that the work begins to emerge. That might seem obvious, but it's not always that obvious. You get close on a painting and you like certain parts of it, and you're working really hard not to then mess it up or preserve. You want to preserve something that you like. Sometimes you have to destroy that, and yeah, over time I've just learned to take risks, trust my gut, and just throw paint around, pretty much.
Does this piece have a name to it, or does it just exist the way that it is and people can interpret it the way that they want to?
Well, it's both. I try not to title my paintings in a way that will create an idea or define. I don't like to limit the work. I don't like to limit the work for the viewer either. It's abstract work. I want people to see and connect with it however they see and connect with it, if they do. But titling can be fun. This painting is called Red L. Again, in an attempt not to lead, I didn't put the red L in there after having an idea of an L, and it wasn't even an L. But usually I finish a painting and then the titles come afterwards, after a few days of thinking about it, or so sometimes I'm very literal in the titling, just so I'm not leading the viewer.
And what about this other piece that we have in the studio with us?
Oh, well, that's interesting. That painting is called Juliet. And the reason why it's called Juliet is because it sort of reminded me of a code flag, nautical code flags. And one of the nautical code flags is Romeo. And there is no Juliet. So that's Juliet.
So when we asked you to provide us with information before you came in, you talked about the fact that writing, and specifically haikus, were something that you kind of worked with for quite a while. And as you're describing the Romeo and Juliet connection, that kind of evokes that writing, that literary aspect of the work that you do.
I'm pretty fond of poetry and haiku because they are sort of abstracted varieties of writing. I like the language itself. And when I was writing more, I was often really enamored with creating the sentence or creating a poem, moving the words around so that they sounded and felt and looked a certain way visually. And yeah, it is. It's an abstracted form of writing.
I think that's why I've always liked E.E. Cummings, is that there's the words and it's what they say, but also the way that they look and what he does with punctuation. And
yeah,
it's really, in my mind, it's very masterful. I've never found another poet that I think I like quite the same way.
Yeah, it's very artful.
You have a graduate degree in clinical psychology. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I'm still the same person. Psychology is peeling back layers of humans, and it's similar still to what I'm doing in the studio. And it was similar, writing was a step in between those things, where I'm just really intrigued and enamored by our experience, the human experience. Not necessarily, my painting is not necessarily emotional directly, but it's all a process of self-discovery, which is what intrigued me about psychology, helping others to really get to know their true selves. And I didn't end up pursuing clinical psychology as a career, but it's also a same thread to me, very similar.
And, having spent many years doing arguably some element of psychology in the work that I do in medicine, that is also very process oriented, that you can go in and you can think, okay, well, I need to accomplish these goals, but this person also has their goals that they want to reach. And you're both bringing to the table your own backgrounds, personal experience, and you really don't know where it could end up until you both dive in and start interacting and having that collaborative relationship, which can be a little intimidating at times.
Yeah, it's very vulnerable. It takes a lot of trust. Yeah, they're similar.
Did you need to move through a phase where you felt that vulnerability and allowed yourself to trust as you are, continuing to evolve your art? Was there ever a time of, I don't know, trepidation?
Every day. Yeah, every day still. And not in an insecure way necessarily, but I will be a student for life. There's no doubt. And I have no formal training. And I started to paint. I don't know, I had a little yearning and started painting with a friend. I had been writing, and I got a little bit tired of the limitations of language, actually, and explaining things. Didn't want to explain anything anymore. And I started to paint, and I didn't know what I was doing at all. And it's been just an experiment the whole entire time. And, growing into more confidence that I just need to be as true as I can be and follow my own gut and what brings me alive, and notice what that is and why I like a certain painting, or why I like a certain artist's work. What is it about it? How can I access some of that in my own work? And that's all pretty vulnerable, because you're really putting yourself out there. And but I don't feel intimidated by the vulnerability of painting so much. It's okay with me if people don't like my work. It is okay with me if I'm painting authentic work. If I can feel if I've accessed what I'm trying to access, what the world thinks doesn't matter. I like it when it resonates, but it's not about that anymore.
So that requires a certain amount of trust in yourself.
Yeah. And that comes and goes.
Well, I have to say, it's a little comforting to hear you say this. Not that I want you to suffer in any way whatsoever, but I think it's a very human thing, and that it's not always something that people are willing to share, that there is this, sense of uncertainty that kind of persists throughout life for most people.
Yeah. Well, definitely for me.
Well, for just maybe me too. Yeah. I guess the both of us, we can suggest this. Uh-huh. I don't know, people who are watching, maybe you have this too, or not. But we invite you to join us in this space. This makes me think of our daughters, and we're coming back to the swimming pool. Because obviously you and I are both swim moms, or I want to say we are versus were, because I would submit that I was also a soccer mom, and I probably will always be a soccer mom to some extent. But, our daughters competed against each other. You and I probably spent many hours not knowing each other on opposite ends of the pool deck. And my daughter is 26, so I'm guessing that your daughter is also somewhere around that same age. Mm-hmm. And for me, I have really enjoyed getting to know my children as adults.
Yeah.
Because it's such a different phase. You're not raising them. It's sort of a coexistence. Mm-hmm. As you've continued to grow as an artist, what have you learned about yourself that maybe has had an impact on your relationship with your children?
Well, my daughters have always been my biggest supporters. Yeah, truly, right from the beginning. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know. I've never really thought about it, other than I've always felt like they've been really enamored and excited for me, finding something, they're artistic as well. each of them in their own right. So maybe this will free them also to stay creative, and even if it's, a hobby or something on the side, but they've been really, really crucial to me continuing, as I was growing. I knew that they were right there on the sidelines, not all that differently than I've been there for them. So it's pretty beautiful. Yeah, it's pretty great. Lots of times I'll paint something and, somebody says, I want that. So they're not just, being sweet, even though they're sweet. Yeah. But I actually hadn't seen the pool in this, and I kind of love it. There was the one that I mentioned before that is another painting of mine, actually, that looked like water. Someone said that it had a Hockney-esque vibe because that water also has what looks like a lane line in it, bands of orange and white. That one's actually at the gallery, but it's great. It's a great connection. And now I'll look at this painting in a different way from our years in chlorine.
Well, let's talk about your connection to water that goes beyond that's chlorinated, because I know that you've lived in Maine for a long time, and prior to that, you lived across the big pond and you were connected to water in a different way. So when you talk about process painting and visceral reactions, you're actually drawing from a background that goes back to very early in your life.
Yeah, I think that's an astute observation. It took me a long time to recognize that in myself, that, where this was coming from, because it's definitely not a literal, I saw this, it inspired me, and I went and painted something. It's often in a painting, in the process of painting, or when looking at something finished, that I have a flash of a memory or a smell or a feeling that was recycled, that got lodged in there somewhere and made its way out again. And again, it's not as if I see something and then set out to put it on the canvas, but there's definitely experiences that are coming through. Smells too.
Do you ever try to paint a smell?
Not really. Mm-mm. But I think that sometimes when I'm looking at a work, there's a body memory for me in there, of the way something, a rocky beach in Wales, where, I was 5 years old, and just the way, the very limited amount of memory I have is fog and salt and a jellyfish and a rock cliff. And somehow I'll suddenly be reminded of that after a finished painting. And so it's definitely not direct, but it seeps out.
It's so interesting to talk about this because there's kind of the frontal and the prefrontal cortex and all of the things that are our executive functions and the things that we think we know. But then there's the things that we know and we don't even, where do they come from? Where do they sit in our neurons and our brains and the rest of our body? And when they do kind of emerge again, sometimes it can be really startling because we didn't even realize we forgot them. We don't know where they've been the whole time. And this continues just indefinitely.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is one of the things I think about a lot when I'm working. I heard it. I heard a quote once. I haven't verified it, but I heard a quote once that the artist Philip Guston said. He was a teacher in the mid-century as well, an art professor, and I heard that he would say to his students, "Paint what you don't know," and that stuck with me because I think for a while, not having gone to school for art in the beginning made me a little uncertain as to whether or not it was okay to call myself an artist or to do it this way, to just learn on my own. And I had some questions about all that I didn't know. And when I heard that quote, it really was very freeing and very liberating because that's exactly what I do. It's exactly, I'm always pushing, into the unknown, which is really uncomfortable and thrilling. But you're absolutely right that what is coming out through that channel is things we know or our experiences that are, I think, lodged in our bodies and in our minds. And so it's a dance, I guess. But I think that being comfortable in the unknown is more fruitful for me and my work than trying to know things and know how and become an expert at anything.
That's not a thing that I've heard many people say. I think people are either apt to just not ever worry about what they know or don't know, or they're apt to say, I want to become the best that I possibly can at one specific thing. But what you're describing, where you're just making a commitment to not knowing and to uncertainty and to be willing to just process through that, I mean, that's not something that is common, I think, for most people. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a community of artists necessarily that I'm in communication about process with, although I read and look at as much art as I can. But yeah, all I can say is that, when I'm looking at a painting that isn't finished and that needs something, that the experience of acting and just taking the risk, that's the experience. That's the whole thing right there for me. If I walk out of a studio knowing that I had just not held myself back, and that might make it sound like I'm all over the map. It's not like that. It's more, can you trust yourself to scribble a whole bunch of pink on that dark brown just because you feel like you want to, and it's scary to wreck it, then it was a good day. And I feel really kind of elated by that. So I'm not sure that directly, answers what you were talking about, but for sure, the uncertainty and then ending with a result that you're happy with, that's where the confidence in the work comes from. I don't think that answered your question, though.
No, it did. Because, I think we're collectively struggling with this enormous uncertainty right now as a culture. So to say that for you, your willingness to wrestle with that, struggle with it, and then come out with something at the end, having trusted your willingness to wrestle with that, I think that's an important consideration for all of us, really, that we're nobody knows how to navigate this. And so just saying, okay, here we are. I'm gonna trust who I am and what I do and know that there's no path forward that's laid out for me. So at least if I can commit to a path and get to the other side, I think that that's very powerful.
Yeah. I think everything we need is in the present moment. And, you can be uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable right now. But I think that if you're here now and you're in the moment, there's nothing wrong, and I think it's when we, start to think too much about the future or the past that we create our own little dramas. And and I think that something like painting just really keeps me present. I lose 8 hours at a time. I'll just kind of like come up for air and I'm, oh my gosh, I gotta go, and it's a pretty great feeling to kind of just be there and not be fretting about what could come or how things have been, ideally.
How did you come to the place where you decided, now it's time to bring my art to the world? Now I'd like to affiliate myself with the Portland Art Gallery and make myself more vulnerable and be willing to share the work that I'm doing?
Well, I don't know how I would have gotten there if it were all up to me. I can be a perfectionist in some ways. It's never quite good enough. And so I was really lucky that, I had opportunities present themselves to me. And so all I had to do was be brave and say yes, even if inside I was like, no, but I was invited into a couple of galleries. So I was fortunate that I didn't have to go through the submission process, and I've learned a lot just by working with galleries about how to finish the work and prep the work and make it gallery ready. But if I had to get to a point and then decide, okay, now I'm ready to take this to a different level, I'm not sure I still would have taken the leap, because I would be waiting for the work to be just a little bit better or a little bit more X, Y, Z. I don't know. So, but it was a real honor to join the gallery here in Portland, because it's nice to be meeting other artists locally and have somewhere that is in our town and our little city that I love so much. So it's really fantastic. I'm thrilled to be there.
Did somebody find your art, look at your art and say, Laurie, this is it. It is your time. You need to agree to this. You need to jump in and be willing to do this. Did somebody support you in that?
Yeah, yes. Along the way, there have been those people. And the first person that comes to mind, I don't know, Erin Flett. I saw you have Erin Flett pillows. So Erin, who I know, I have a little history with her from another chapter of life. And she had her screen prints in Serena and Lily, which is, I don't know if you know Serena and Lily. They're a home goods art, beautiful company. And they were probably one of the first places that I'm aware of that was curating art to sell online. And so this was years ago. And Erin said to me, it's time. And I was like, it's not time. She's like, it's time. I was like, no, it's not time. And she said, all right, I'm going to bypass you. And she went to them and she said, you need to, check out her work. And they wrote to me and said, we want your work. And that was like the first really big, brave yes. I had to just go for it. So yeah, I think of her a lot in that way. And it's nice when you can trust someone and believe that they're seeing something that, you you can't see or don't want to see yet. So we'll always be grateful for that.
Erin is a wonderful person.
Yeah.
And I remember meeting her way before she had the success that she has worked so hard to achieve at this point. But I think it was at Picnic, I don't know, 8 years ago, something like that. But this kind of, I don't even know how to describe it exactly, but it was kind of like a room full of artists bringing their things together. And I looked at her stuff and I said, wow, I really like your design. And I think she actually gave me something even at that moment.
Yeah.
I ended
Sounds
up,
like Erin.
yeah, absolutely. I ended up doing some work with her on a story at some point. And then I think she gave me the pillows. I don't even know how this all came together. But then I just, I've continued to be impressed that not only is she shares, and she brings people along, and she doesn't just make it her own journey and her own path. And I feel like that's part of the creative collaborative that needs to take place in order to encourage people to continue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great to have people like Erin. Not all of us are wired in the same way. And, if we were all collaborative, it would be overwhelming, but for those of us who, I tend to be a bit quieter in that way, it's really fantastic to be, scooped up by those who are leaders, and yeah, she's pretty amazing. Yeah. She's deep waters too. I like her a lot.
I think you're right. And it is true that we can't all be uber collaborators because I would also be overwhelmed because I also tend to be a little bit on the quiet side. But it is nice to know that we can also kind of coexist within this kind of larger sphere, and everybody contributes in the way that works and creates possibilities or space for other people to do the same.
Yeah, for sure. There's a bit of a yin yang to all of it, and I sometimes think about the monks who are spending their days in prayer, and we need that too. And then we need the take charge leaders and vocal, influencers in the world too. And it's all a big balance.
I agree. Very, very well said. Yes. Well, I've enjoyed our conversation today.
Me too.
And I will forever associate you with the lane lines and the swim mom. You and I will probably always have that kind of in our hearts, that past background. But I'm very glad that you're a member of the Portland Art Gallery now. It's been wonderful to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you. It was really great to chat. Thanks for having me.
I've been speaking with artist Laurie Fisher, and you can find her work at the Portland Art Gallery, also online, the Portland Art Gallery website. I hope you take the time to come to one of our openings in the future and get a chance to meet her. I'm Dr. Lisa Belisle, and you've been listening to or watching Radio Maine. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.